Hey guys, tonight we journey back through incense-thick corridors, over creaking palace floors, and behind the heavy carved screens of ancient China. There's gold-threaded silk, peacocks with bad attitudes, and scrolls that could decide the fate of empires. You're about to walk in embroidered slippers through the life of Empress Wu, China's only woman to officially rule as emperor. You'll witness power plays in painted pavilions, eavesdrop on tea-sipping spies, and feel the chill of court politics, where a wrongly placed hairpin could mean exile. Fair warning, if you think modern workplace drama is intense, you probably won't survive 5 minutes in this royal snake pit. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know, where are you watching from, and what time is it over there? Drop it in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born around 624 CE, tucked into the cradles of a wealthy but not yet noble family. The Wu clan has risen through trade and a sprinkle of bureaucratic favor, but they're not imperial yet. Your father, Wu Shiho, is a lumber merchant with ties to the Sui and early Tang courts. You, meanwhile, are a baby wrapped in fine cloth with sharper eyes than most adults. Even as a toddler, you're told you speak with uncanny clarity. Your mother claims you understand poetry before you can walk. Typical proud mother exaggeration maybe, but there's something uncanny about how you study people. By the time you're 12, you're reading classics and writing essays. You're also skilled in music, calligraphy, and how to make a first impression last. And one day, the emperor hears about this bright young girl from a merchant household. He needs concubines, not lovers necessarily, but symbols of power, beauty, and family alliances. You're chosen, like an ornament plucked from the market, and swept off to the palace of Tang Emperor Taizong. Inside the palace, your world flips. No more simple family dinners or strolls in peach orchards. Now it's all silk screens, gossip disguised as poetry, and eunuchs who never forget a face. You're given the title Kairen, a 5th-rank concubine. That sounds important, but you're basically mid-level on the imperial dating ladder. Taizong hardly notices you at first. So what do? You wait. You listen. You learn. You figure out which officials are ambitious, which consorts are insecure, and which servants carry more information than tea. You observe how the emperor likes his letters written, which advisors he tolerates, and what sorts of metaphors make him pause mid-slurp. Then, fate pulls a sharp turn. Taizong falls ill, terminally so. And you, along with dozens of other concubines, are now technically off-limits. The law says you must become a Buddhist nun upon the emperor's death, a kind of imperial retirement plan that's more prison than piety. You shave your head, wrap yourself in coarse robes, and find yourself in Ganye Temple with a lot of women who aren't thrilled to be there. But here's where your quiet power kicks in. You don't collapse. You adapt. You study Buddhism. You memorize scripture. You even help manage the small temple's library. It's during this time that you begin writing letters. And not just prayer scrolls, real letters, targeted ones, to the new emperor, Gaozong, the son of your old master. Now, this is where things get spicy, but still very hush-hush. Historians still argue whether Gaozong and you had feelings for each other while you were still in his father's court. Some say, yes, clandestine glances, accidental poetry exchanges. Others insist nothing happened until after you were tucked safely in the nunnery. Either way, Gaozong remembers you. And when he visits the temple to offer incense for his father's spirit, he arranges a quiet conversation, just the two of you. You speak, you charm, you recite a poem, probably something about plum blossoms and destiny. The emperor is moved, and shortly after, you're recalled to court. Cue the side eyes and scandal. Bringing a concubine of your father-in-law back into the palace? That's not just unconventional, it's practically a royal mic drop. The other women hate it. The Confucian scholars bristle behind their sleeves. But Gaozong doesn't care. He makes you his favorite consort within months. At night, while courtiers mutter and scribes sharpen their brushes, you lie awake, planning, not just how to stay safe, but how to shape something greater, a future, a place where your voice echoes in court records, where your signature carries weight. And when your first son is born, it's more than a maternal moment. It's a declaration. You're not just surviving the palace, you're planting roots. Meanwhile, behind palace doors, strange things begin happening. A rival consort's child mysteriously falls ill. A court lady known to speak against you is reassigned, then disappears. Maybe coincidence, maybe strategy. You're not the only one playing this game, but you're playing it smarter. And through it all, you remain calm, still, focused. You write in longhand every night. Your brush whispers against silk paper. You read military reports, palace budgets, religious pamphlets, anything to understand the empire better than the men who run it. You're not Empress yet, but you're closer than anyone dares to admit. The halls are colder now. Not literally. There are still tapestries to block the wind and glowing braziers to keep the jade floors warm, but metaphorically, the temperature has dropped. You're no longer the mysterious new consort who charmed her way out of a convent. Now you're something more dangerous, a mother, with a child who bears the emperor's blood. The other consorts notice, especially Empress Wang and Consort Shao, who have held their positions through layers of silk, ceremony, and the careful manipulation of gossip. They watch you like cats watching a snake that hasn't moved yet. You smile politely, you attend rituals, you bow at all the right angles. But you're not just waiting anymore. You're maneuvering. Gaozong, bless his sleepy-eyed devotion, visits you more and more often. He consults you on small matters, where to plant the winter chrysanthemums, what kind of paper to use for a new edict. He probably thinks it's romantic. You know it's training. He's a gentle emperor, Gaozong, kind, but indecisive. His health is inconsistent, his migraines frequent. He doesn't crave power like some rulers. You suspect, privately, that he would have preferred to be a painter or a monk, which works in your favor, because while he rests, you're learning how the court moves in his absence. Now, there's an issue. Your position as a favored consort doesn't grant you real authority. You're still beneath Empress Wang, and technically, your son is beneath hers, even though she has no children of her own. It's a fragile hierarchy, stitched together with appearances and hope, and you plan to pull one of those stitches loose. Then it happens. a scandal, or maybe a strategy. You give birth to another child, a daughter. Around the same time, consort Xiao's infant mysteriously dies. The official story is illness. The unofficial whispers say the child was smothered. Fingers begin pointing. You hold your daughter close, quiet as snow. You don't make accusations, you don't raise your voice, but somehow word reaches Gaozong that Empress Wang and consort Xiao may have been involved in treachery, that they've slandered you, that they're enemies of peace in the inner court. Historians still argue whether you orchestrated the entire thing, if the smothered child ever existed, or if palace servants were bribed to spread stories like lantern light through silk corridors. One account claims a handmaid overheard you rehearsing tears in the mirror. Another suggests you stood silently at the scene of the child's death, eyes dry, but fingers tapping a rhythm only you understood. What's certain is that in the aftermath, Gaozong begins drafting a new edict, one that will raise you above Wang, one that will place the imperial seal closer to your fingertips. But there's a catch. Removing an empress is not like replacing a rug. It requires ceremony, precedent, and ideally, public justification. Enter a new tactic, accusation. Suddenly, Empress Wang is accused of witchcraft. Yes, spells, talismans, hairpins laced with dark symbols. In the Tang court, this isn't just superstition, it's high treason. Even a hint of necromancy can doom a family for generations. She's stripped of her title, paraded in disgrace, and eventually exiled. Not long after, consort Xiao meets the same fate. Their allies scatter, their names are struck from records, at least until later dynasties restore them in footnotes and sighs. And you? You're elevated, Empress Wu now. Your official edicts begin as ceremonial, suggestions for the proper colors of mourning robes, adjustments to how rice is taxed in the southern provinces, a new imperial garden that will bloom year-round to symbolize eternal harmony. But the tone is changing. There's steel now beneath the petals. And you're keeping notes, pages of them. You've begun compiling a shadow record of palace activity. Not just gossip, but who meets whom, which ministers delay their reports, which generals include subtle insults in their scrolls. You read between brushstrokes. You memorize handwriting. Meanwhile, Gaozong grows sicker. His headaches are worsening, his vision dimming. He defers more often to you in council meetings, then stops attending altogether. Officially, you sit beside him as regent. Unofficially, you begin hosting audiences alone. You are now signing edicts in your own name, albeit under the fiction that you're acting on behalf of the emperor. You even design a new signature, more fluid, more commanding. The ministers notice. Some squirm, some bow deeper. And in the shadows, you build a new bureaucracy. Your allies are mostly outsiders, scholars too brilliant to have patrons, eunuchs with sharp memories, widows who run household networks like tiny empires of their own. You reward loyalty with land, titles, and safety. You punish betrayal with demotion or disappearance. Still, there are those who resist. Senior Confucians shake their heads in their sleeves. They whisper in their poetry, "A woman cannot rule. The heavens favor the yang." You counter with parables, with legal codes, with silence. One scholar presents a scroll quoting ancient texts forbidding women from holding authority. You thank him, then issue a counter scroll quoting different ancient texts, His beard reportedly turns gray overnight. You've begun to regulate even court dress. Yellow is for the emperor, crimson for generals. But now certain shades of purple are restricted to your allies. An entire language is forming, not through speech, but silk and tassels. You wear your meanings like armor. Then comes the Golden Edict. It's issued on a spring morning with heavy clouds and petals sticking to the floor. Gaozong's seal is at the bottom, but your words shape the middle. You are now Heavenly Empress. A title newly coined, a role newly defined. Gaozong still lives, technically. He eats soft fruit, he listens to music, but when foreign ambassadors visit, it's you they bow to. You have climbed higher than any woman before. You've done it one decree at a time. And the ink is still wet. Your steps echo louder now, not because the floor has changed, same polished tiles, same sandalwood corridors, but because people listen differently when you walk past. The attendants bow lower, the ministers glance up faster. You've become more than Empress. You've become a presence, a weather pattern. Gaozong's health continues its slow decline. He naps through court meetings, flinches at loud sounds, and begins referring questions to you without even looking up. When he does speak, it's often vague, dreamlike. Some say his mind is slipping. Others say he's just relieved not to be in charge anymore. Either way, you step in. You begin holding consultative audiences, a harmless-sounding term that means you gather advisors without the emperor present. At first, these are informal, then regular, then expected. The men in the room are uneasy. They look at one another, waiting to see who will object first. No one does. Because, really, who wants to challenge the person who just rewrote the court hierarchy with a few brushstrokes? You start signing more documents directly, not just palace business, but regional edicts, troop movements, tax modifications. Gaozong is still alive, but your name is the one traveling on horseback to distant provinces. The bureaucracy, too, begins to change. You replace some of the crustier ministers, those who openly quote Confucian codes about gender and harmony, with younger, more flexible officials. Many are from modest backgrounds, men with no old alliances, no family clans to satisfy. Some are scholars who failed civil exams but dazzled you with their essays. Others are eunuchs who've memorized entire law books and can recite them while pouring tea. These are your people now. They owe their careers to you, and you never let them forget it. Then there's the secret police, or rather, the Bureau of Information. Officially, it's just a record-keeping office meant to catalog tax scrolls and keep track of local officials. Unofficially, it's a spider web of watchers, some dressed in robes, some dressed in servant clothes, all trained to observe, report, and remain invisible. You don't use it excessively, yet, but it's comforting knowing which courtier had tea with a general who once delayed your message by a day and a half. Now, with the palace under your fingertips, you shift focus beyond the capital. You've always known that power is not just about proximity to the throne, it's about how far your shadow stretches. You send edicts to the provinces, particularly to areas neglected under Gaozong's administration. You reduce grain taxes for 2 years in flood-affected regions. You increase funding for schools in the southwest. The scholars notice. A ruler who governs like a mother, one writes. You frame the quote. At the same time, you begin elevating Buddhism. This isn't just a spiritual choice, it's political. Confucian scholars despise the flexibility of Buddhist teachings, but Buddhism appeals to the common people. It allows for female enlightenment. It speaks of karmic justice and balance, not rigid hierarchy. In a world where you, a woman, sit on a throne usually reserved for emperors, this matters. You sponsor the carving of thousands of Buddha statues in caves, sponsor translation of scriptures, and invite monks to palace ceremonies. In return, they speak your name in sermons. They say you are the reincarnation of Maitreya, the future Buddha, that your rule is divinely ordained. Gaozong hears some of this. He smiles faintly. Maybe he believes it. Maybe he's just tired. Then one evening, during a moon-gazing festival, he signs another edict, quietly, without fanfare. It officially names you co-ruler, not regent, not acting empress, but equal in authority. The edict is short, poetic, and slightly ambiguous, which is just how you like it. From this moment on, your commands carry the full weight of law. Ministers no longer look over their shoulders to see if the emperor agrees. You've become the source. And yet, in the court archives, the word usurpation begins to whisper itself into the margins of scrolls. Historians still argue whether Gaozong issued the co-rulership willingly or under pressure. Some claim you blackmailed him. Others say he loved you too much to resist. And then there's the theory that he simply didn't want the job anymore. In truth, maybe it was all three. But there's one thing everyone agrees on. The court is no longer the same. You begin modifying rituals, small things first, the order of court entrance, the number of incense sticks burned in a temple. But soon, more significant changes follow. A new seal is commissioned bearing both your name and a phoenix emblem, a symbol of female sovereignty, not the dragon, which represents the emperor. You don't steal his symbol, you create your own. Your seal presses into more clay now than his ever did. Then, one day, you issue an edict that startles even your closest allies. You create an office within the palace called the Bureau of Women's Affairs, not just to manage the inner court, but to advise on national policy. You appoint widows, nuns, and scholarly daughters of merchants as consultants. Some of the male ministers raise eyebrows. One coughs nervously and calls it innovative. Another suggests that it may unsettle tradition. You smile. Then raise their taxes. Meanwhile, you begin working late into the night. Reports pile up. You annotate them yourself. You adjust military assignments, revise budgets, and write notes in the margins of tax audits. Too harsh. Recheck merchant records. Why is Hunan underreporting salt by 2%? You also keep a personal journal, though no one is allowed to read it, not even your most trusted aides. Rumor says you once burned a page because a court cat stepped on it. The cat was unharmed. The scroll was not. By now, even your enemies admit you are no figurehead. You are methodical, intuitive, and deeply, painfully aware of how power operates. You don't indulge in excess. You don't host lavish parties. Your luxury is silence, order, and control. And outside the palace walls, the people begin to notice the change. Roads are repaired, teachers are hired, floodgates are reinforced. Even the tax collectors become marginally more polite. A peasant in a south village kneels in front of a shrine carved in your likeness and whispers a prayer, not out of fear, but respect. A farmer names his ox after you. You pretend not to be amused. You know this reign is still temporary. You know Gaozong still breathes. But you also know this. The empire already obeys your voice. Dawn breaks behind clouded silk screens. But the tension in the palace doesn't lift with the morning mist. By now, your presence is like incense, pervasive, hard to escape, and impossible to ignore. But Empress or not, you still live in a court where affection is conditional, and loyalty shifts like sand under embroidered slippers. Which brings us to the cradle. Your children are growing. Sons and daughters, each one a thread in the future tapestry of succession. But among them, one child stands out, your infant daughter. Bright-eyed, soft-skinned, always bundled in silks dyed the color of plum blossoms. Until the morning, she isn't. She's gone. Dead, they say. Suffocated in her sleep. The nursemaid is inconsolable, or silent, depends on the account. There are no signs of illness, no sign of struggle, just stillness, like the universe held its breath. You don't scream, you don't weep, you sit still, wrapped in robes too heavy for mourning. And when Gaozong arrives, distraught, you speak only once. I left her in the care of Empress Wang. That sentence is a blade. Historians still debate whether this was grief speaking or calculation. Was your daughter's death a cruel twist of fate or a strategic removal, stage managed for maximum impact? There's no proof, only consequences. And the consequences come swiftly. Gaozong is devastated, but also furious. Not at you, at Wang. The Empress had already been falling from grace. This event hammers the final nail into her lacquered coffin. You suggest, softly, that she's unfit to supervise the palace, that perhaps her jealousy has led to carelessness, or worse. Whispers blossom like mold in the court corridors. An investigation follows. Papers shuffle. Servants are interrogated. The nursemaid disappears. So does a cook. Empress Wang pleads innocence. She wears white, fasts, prays publicly. You quietly wear crimson and go about your duties as if nothing has happened. Then Gaozong convenes the ministers. It's rare for him to gather them personally now, and rarer still for him to speak with such clarity. The Empress, he says, has failed to her duties to the inner court and must be removed. A collective inhale sweeps through the room. Heads bow. No one protests. Wang is stripped of her title, her name erased from the inner records. The poems she once sponsored are burned. She's exiled to a quiet corner of the palace with only 3 servants and no writing materials. The message is clear. She will never be heard again. You do not gloat. You simply accept the emperor's decision with a low bow. Then you host a tea ceremony for the court ladies. Casual, calming, mandatory. Everyone attends. From this moment forward, your rivals begin falling like peaches in a windstorm. First, Consort Xiao. She had once been Wang's closest ally. Now she finds her chambers ransacked and her jewelry inventory under review. Days later, she's accused of using forbidden charms to sway the emperor. A fragment of embroidered cloth with cursed symbols is discovered behind her bed. Xiao claims it was a gift from a monk. Gaozong signs the removal decree without blinking. The scroll reads simply, disgraced and unsuitable. That could mean 100 things, or just one. She is gone before the next full moon. But you're not done. You understand better than anyone that power is not secure until the witnesses are silent. So you widen the net. Eunuchs with too much memory are reassigned. Maids who once served Wang are married off to remote guardsmen. One scholar who penned a flattering verse about the former empress is mysteriously invited to teach in the mountains permanently. You tighten control like a ribbon drawn taut around a scroll. And still, you appear calm. Your face is serene. Your tone is gentle. Even when you request the archives to be adjusted, you do so with a smile and an apology for the inconvenience. And while this is happening, the common people remain blissfully unaware. To them, the court is a distant sun, warmth without detail. What they see is this: taxes are stable, roads are being repaired, flood warnings are announced earlier. One official begins publicly issuing rice vouchers during lean months. His idea? No, yours, but you let him have the credit. Meanwhile, in the court, you begin reconfiguring rituals. Some traditionalists grumble, but few have the spine to protest openly. You reorganize the hierarchy of palace staff, ensuring every corridor, every gate, every official has a name you chose or approved. You create new titles, new responsibilities. One such title, Attendant of the Northern Scrolls, is both confusing and oddly prestigious. The man you appoint to it smiles for the first time in years. Gaozong, weakened and often distracted by illness, spends more time in the gardens. He paints. He composes forgettable poems about cranes and rainstorms. He leaves state matters to you entirely now. Still, he's not a puppet, not exactly. He's a man who understands that power in your hands means peace at his table, and for that, he's grateful. Probably. Every so often, he speaks publicly, reminding everyone that you are his partner, his guide, his most trusted voice. He compares you to the stars, distant but dependable. You thank him with a poem of your own, though yours is better, naturally. Then comes the edict. You don't write it, not directly, but you oversee it. You review the draft, edit the phrasing, and suggest the final seal. It declares you Mother of the Nation, a new title with ceremonial weight and political implications. No one dares question it. Even the ministers who once rolled their eyes now roll out red carpets. Somewhere in the south, a temple begins carving your face into a hillside. You don't commission it, but you don't stop it either. You've won. For now. But victory is like lacquered wood. It gleams, but it cracks if you press too hard. And already, small fissures are forming. Allies growing ambitious. Sons growing older. Servants whispering behind closed doors. You keep a calm smile, but your brush trembles slightly as you write tomorrow's orders. You tell yourself it's the tea, or the air. Not fear. Certainly not regret. You've removed rivals, shifted the balance of heaven and earth, and carved your name into the clay of power. But now, you must hold it. You wake early now, before the gongs sound, before the palace murmurs to life. You sit quietly, combing your hair in long, practiced strokes. Your reflection flickering in a bronze mirror polished so often it glows like a full moon. The court will stir soon, with clattering boots and murmuring scrolls, but you already know what today holds, because you wrote it last night. From the outside, your power seems settled. You're the Empress, yes, but you're also something more. The de facto ruler. Ministers defer to you. Regional governors write directly to you. Foreign emissaries offer gifts with your name embroidered in gold thread. Yet there's still a veil, a curtain behind which decisions must be made quietly, delicately, as though you haven't already rearranged the pillars of power. So you start building something stronger. You begin installing your own people in more visible positions, not just background clerks or advisors, but regional commanders, tax collectors, even court poets. Every appointment is signed with the emperor's name, of course, but it's your hand that moves the brush. A young eunuch named Wei Tuaner catches your eye, not for his charm, but for his memory. He remembers every minor official's face, every overheard conversation, every misstep at court dinners. You promote him, carefully, to a mid-level post. Others grumble. You ignore them. You also elevate Zhang Yiqi and Zhang Changzong, brothers with manners as smooth as their cheekbones. They're smart, certainly, but more importantly, they're loyal. They serve as your eyes, ears, and sometimes, whispers say, companions. But no one dares question their rapid rise. They know better. The emperor's presence in court becomes less frequent, more ceremonial. His health continues to decline, and while he is still revered, his absence grows louder than his voice ever did. One evening, a courier from the western provinces arrives breathless, covered in dust. A rebellion has broken out, small but loud. You read the report in silence, then issue your orders before anyone asks. Troops are sent. The rebels scatter. But what matters more is your speed. Ministers notice. Her mind is quicker than her brush, one says in private. Another begins compiling a genealogy of previous female rulers, desperately trying to find precedent for what you've become. They'll struggle. You're not just unique, you're rewriting the script entirely. One scroll at a time. Soon, you begin issuing edicts without waiting for Gozong's approval. Oh, you still say he's reviewed them, and sometimes you even wake him for a ceremonial nod, but everyone understands the new order. His seal is a formality. Yours is the force. You regulate everything: temple land ownership, silk production quotas, canal repair schedules. You even adjust the length of mourning periods based on seasonal crop cycles. No sense in starving just to honor a distant cousin, you write half joking. And you revise the court calendar. Not drastically, just enough to move festivals closer to harvest times, ensure key rituals happen when travel is easier. The court grumbles, but the people benefit. Farmers thank the gods. You smile and let them. Then comes your first imperial moral essay, a genre you invent on the spot. It's part philosophical musing, part political commentary, and part gentle scolding. You publish them under the emperor's name, of course, but it's your hand that moves the brush. One essay discusses harmony through precision. It's a treatise on order, how small details in etiquette, architecture, even handwriting reflect the greater harmony of the cosmos. Ministers scramble to buy better calligraphy brushes. One even hires a private tutor to relearn his characters. Another essay explores the responsibilities of sons. Subtle, strategic. You're already thinking beyond Gozong, beyond the present. Your sons are coming of age, and you've begun calculating which one might not completely ruin what you've built. But succession is a storm, still too distant to name. For now, you focus on refining the machine of government. You create the Recorders of the Inner Court, a team of scribes whose job is to log every decree, every meeting, every change. It's dry work, mind-numbing, some say. You love it. Because what's more powerful than memory, the narrative? You're ensuring that history won't forget who truly ruled, that even if later generations try to erase you, your words will remain, carved in ink, whispered in ceremonies. Meanwhile, the scholars begin to murmur. Not all of them are afraid. Some are curious, intrigued by your precision, your command of poetry, your ability to fold politics into metaphor. They begin debating whether you are a new kind of sovereign, a heavenly balance, one calls you, drawing on yin-yang philosophy. Still, not everyone is convinced. One morning, you're handed a scroll filled with veiled critiques, an anonymous composition circulating among junior officials. It accuses the court of confusion between positions, of unnatural shadows cast by the sun. It doesn't name you, but it doesn't have to. You smile. Then commission a grand poetry competition for the court, inviting all scribes and ministers to submit verses on the theme of clarity and light. You award the winner a new post and quietly reassign several others to provinces with very cold winters. Let them write metaphors about frost. At night, when the palace grows quiet, you sometimes visit the archives, alone. You read old court records, scrolls yellowed by time, filled with forgotten names and extinguished ambitions. Occasionally, you recognize a name you helped vanish. You feel nothing, mostly. You've become the architect of a new political structure, one designed to outlast even yourself. You don't just react to events, you craft them, like a chess master who moves 5 turns ahead and still appears surprised when the king falls. Your voice, even in silence, rules the day. And then, one winter afternoon, Gaozong coughs blood. Servants panic. You remain still. A physician is summoned, then another, then 3. They all whispered the same diagnosis in increasingly cautious tones. The emperor may not recover. You look out the window. Snow is falling. Each flake drifts like a thought unspoken. You nod once and begin preparing your next decree. It happens not with trumpets, not with chaos, but with silence. The kind of silence that settles in your bones before you even hear the words. Gaozong is dead. The news arrives wrapped in ritual, carried by trembling hands and soft-voiced eunuchs. The emperor passed peacefully in his sleep, they say, though the physicians had been less poetic only hours earlier. His decline had been slow, his body growing more fragile than the silk drapes that surrounded him. You don't cry. Instead, you bow your head and whisper a verse, one you composed the night before, just in case, something about plum blossoms falling before spring. And then you get to work. You could have disappeared, retired to a monastery like a proper Empress dowager, lived out your days in poetry and tea. That would have been respectable, traditional, predictable. But you're not here to be respectable. You're here to rule. Gaozong's will names your son as heir, Li Jie, one of your middle sons, cautious and agreeable. You nod, accept the decision, but you also know that he's not ready, not really, and certainly not alone. So you don the robes of mourning, dark, heavy, stately, and sit behind a screen while he holds the first audience as emperor. It's a show. Everyone knows who wrote the speech. Every word he speaks is your echo. Thus begins the screen reign. You sit just out of sight, behind a thin silk partition, and speak through intermediaries. A strange compromise between tradition and truth. You're not the emperor, but you might as well be. And in that shadowed role, you thrive. You start with the court. Ministers shuffle nervously under your gaze, even if they can't quite see it. You remove a few old advisors, too vocal, Too stiff. One suddenly retires for health reasons. Another is reassigned to the archives, a fate worse than exile. You reward the loyal, promote the clever, and test the ambitious ones with impossible assignments. Just managing irrigation for the Yellow River Basin during flood season, you say, with a smile. Meanwhile, you issue edicts in your son's name, policies on land reform, grain distribution, and school funding. The people approve. The farmers bless your judgment, even if they don't know whose judgment it truly is. You introduce one peculiar reform that still makes historians squint. You reorganize regional tax zones based on dialect boundaries. People govern best when they speak the same words, your note reads in the margin. Brilliant? Possibly. Odd? Definitely. And you're not just reshaping policy, you're reshaping language itself. You commission the creation of new Chinese characters, dozens of them. Many scholars hate this. They say the classics are sacred, not meant to be expanded like a kitchen pantry. But you ignore them. These new characters represent concepts you want emphasized. Fairness, clarity, virtue, words the old Confucians never bothered to write down. Your characters are taught in schools, printed on official scrolls. Some are chiseled into bronze. Others fade after your reign ends, but for now, they bloom across the empire like strange new flowers. Then you make a move that turns whispers into full-blown shock. You depose your own son. Yes, Emperor Zhongzong, Li Jie, your own child, your supposed successor. He made the mistake of thinking co-ruler meant independent. He began favoring his in-laws, issuing edicts without your approval, and worst of all, calling you retired in a public speech. Retired. You smile. Then you act. You remove him in a single day. No battle, no blood, just a quiet palace meeting and a signed scroll. He's demoted to prince. His robes are changed. His seal is collected. You send him off to a scenic estate with excellent tea and very poor communication. The ministers are stunned, but none protest, because here's the truth they've all begun to understand. You are not temporary. You install another son in his place, Li Dan, quiet and pliable. But again, you rule behind the screen. The boy signs what you write. He sits where you tell him. You teach him to smile at the right moments and nod on cue. And while the empire carries on, you begin preparing something more permanent. Your titles begin to change. Empress Dowager, Co-Regent, Mother of the Nation. But in practice, you are emperor, just without the name. Not yet. Outside the palace, rebellions flicker in the provinces. Some challenge your gender, others your reforms. One calls you the dragon in phoenix feathers. Meant as an insult, you turn it into a badge of honor. You respond not with brute force, but with strategy. You send letters, not soldiers. Well, letters and soldiers. But the letters come first. Clever, calming, full of grace. Promises of pardon, offers of land. Threats disguised as invitations. Most rebels surrender before your troops arrive. And the ones that don't? Well, you keep your sword clean, but your generals don't. Still, you never become cruel. You're calculated, surgical. A letter here, a reassignment there. One governor who refused to acknowledge your authority finds himself suddenly in charge of counting cows in the most remote prefecture in the empire. He counts 427. Twice. In the capital, life flourishes. The markets are full. The temples ring with chants. The annual flood is unusually mild, which you immediately credit to the blessings of your good governance. Meanwhile, you commission a grand monument, a stele taller than 2 horses, polished to perfection. But instead of praising yourself, you leave it blank. Scholars argue about this for centuries. Was it humility, irony, a warning, or was it just unfinished? Only you know, and you're not telling. Your power now is not just felt, it's expected. You sign edicts without hesitation. You revise legal codes. You hold midnight councils with only oil lamps and tea. The ministers stop questioning your right to rule. They start wondering how long you'll live. And, quietly, a few of them wonder something even more radical. What if the woman behind the curtain stepped forward? You know the moment has come when even your rivals start pretending it was their idea. A visiting delegation from the West kneels before you. Not your son, not a proxy, but you. They address you as emperor. Not empress, not dowager, not regent, you, Emperor Wu. You smile gently and wave them up, offering tea. Back in court, the idea floats like incense smoke. What if the titles just reflected the reality? You are already making all the decisions. You hold the seals. You approve the generals. You authorize the treasury. If someone's steering the dragon boat, does it matter what silk they wear? Of course, the Confucian scholars clutch their scrolls with white-knuckled outrage. A woman? An emperor? Unheard of, unnatural, unthinkable. You nod and thank them for their feedback. Then quietly remind them of the Bureau of Information and its remarkable memory for who's been disloyal. Their protest essays dry up quicker than spilled ink in summer. So you begin the slow, deliberate ceremony of elevation. First, you change the name of the dynasty. Tang is your late husband's family, your son's family, but not yours. You create a new dynasty, Zhou, the same name as the ancient sage kings whose reigns were long and virtuous and, more importantly, unarguable. The Tang name isn't erased, just paused, stored gently in the annals until further notice. Your critics wail, but your supporters, they flourish. You don't rush the coronation. You make it ceremonial, sacred, quiet. A moment where power doesn't shout, it just is. You wear robes of deep crimson, lined with black and gold. A phoenix crown rests on your head. Not a dragon, because you're not borrowing symbols, you're creating them. You issue an edict stating that you are now Huangdi, the same imperial title used by every male ruler before you. You don't say female emperor. You don't say special case. You say emperor, full stop. And the empire, it accepts it. Because by now, you're not a theory, you're reality. You're the reason the roads are safe, the granaries are stocked, and the border generals have new boots. You've stabilized the economy, enforced laws, and even hosted poetry contests that people actually want to attend. So when the bells ring across Luyong to announce the new sovereign, people don't panic. They exhale. Still, power doesn't become easier now. It becomes heavier. You must govern without precedent. You must anticipate criticism before it's spoken, defend decisions before they're questioned. You establish morning rituals that blend Tang and Zhou traditions. You hold court with even greater formality, flanked by aides who speak in tandem with you, like echoes with eyebrows. You start issuing edicts etched into bronze mirrors. Yes, mirrors. Because every subject, from noble to farmer, should see themselves reflected in your rule, literally and metaphorically. These mirrors are polished, inscribed, and sent to provincial halls. Some governors mount them in their private chambers. Others stare into them, confused, wondering if there's a message hidden in the reflection. Maybe there is. You also make a surprising move, appointing women to formal positions in government. A few are widows of scholars. Others are nuns with deep scriptural knowledge. You place them in charge of education, court protocol, and even border negotiations. Ministers gasp. One faints. Another retires out of moral discomfort. You smile, sip tea, and suggest a replacement with sharper handwriting. Your court becomes known for its precision. Rituals begin and end to the chime. Reports arrive on time or not at all. You encourage scholars to debate, but only after they've submitted a polite outline. You have no patience for chaotic thinking. Still, it's not all discipline. You host lantern festivals with puppets and plum wine. You commission musical pieces about cloud shapes and falling leaves. One performance involves 6 dancers dressed as mythical animals reenacting the life cycle of a peach. You cry laughing. At one point, you release an edict regulating the exact angle of hat brims in the imperial court. You write, "Too low, and no one can make eye contact." Some call it ridiculous, but others see genius. Because when you regulate hats, you're really regulating attention. And attention is everything. Meanwhile, foreign dignitaries come more frequently now. From India, Persia, and beyond. They come bearing silk, lapis, and questions. How did this woman rise? How did she maintain control? You answer with hospitality, poetry, and one well-timed glance that makes even seasoned generals reconsider their posture. Still, there are threats. Rebellions flicker like candle flames, especially in distant provinces where the idea of a female ruler still makes the old guard shiver. You dispatch generals swiftly, but you also send teachers. You mandate that schools begin instruction with lines from your edicts. Children now grow up knowing your name as naturally as they know their grandparents, and still some whisper. One group of nobles meet secretly at a hot spring to discuss restoring the tang. Another plots with exiled sons and disgruntled cousins. You know all about it. The Bureau of Information has already sent you 3 scrolls and a rough sketch of their seating chart. You wait. Let them stew. Then, at the next court festival, you announce a public forgiveness decree, magnanimous, generous, soothing. All minor conspirators will be spared if they present themselves within 10 days and recite the Oath of Harmony, a beautiful poem which you wrote yourself. Half the plotters show up wearing robes they haven't ironed in years. The rest? Well, the tea you serve at court that week is very calming. Still, you're not paranoid. You're precise. And though you've finally stepped out from behind the curtain, you never forget it's there. At night, you still sit alone sometimes, brushing your hair by candlelight. Your bronze mirror, etched now with your own edicts, catches the flame. You see your reflection flicker. You don't look like a tyrant, or a goddess, or a legend. You look like a woman who wrote her own story and made everyone else read it. Power, once officially in your hands, does not settle like dust. It shifts, resists, tests you at every turn. And now, seated alone in the grand audience hall, its beams high as temple spires, and the floor cold beneath your embroidered slippers, you feel the full gravity of it. Not fear, not regret, just wait. You issue edicts now like a sculptor chiseling marble, deliberate, exact, and beautiful. One orders a regional census with margins annotated by you, double-check rice output in Hubei, and flag inflated numbers from Lu Prefecture. Another regulates palace expenditures with a list of banned extravagances. No more ivory fans, no more phoenix feather ink brushes, and, bafflingly to some, no more imported swan eggs. You note, we are not feeding immortals. And yet, for all your streamlining, you know the empire lives and breathes in the gaps, so you cultivate the image of grace. Your court becomes known for poetry salons, incense competitions, and philosophical debates moderated by veiled women scholars. One such scholar wins favor after explaining how tea steeping mirrors political patience. She receives her own residence, and a very nice teapot. You've also begun publishing more essays, reflections, as you call them. One explores the moral value of silence. Another discusses dream interpretation in governing. Some claim you're turning mystical. Others recognize these are subtle defenses of your rule, packaged in metaphor. Still, you don't just philosophize, you act. Rebellions continue, some sparked by power-hungry nobles, others by frustrated sons, yours included. One of your boys, ambitious and too clever for his own good, begins hosting private salons with suspicious guests. He writes revisionist history scrolls under a pen name. You sigh. You don't have him killed. That would be inelegant. Instead, you offer him a provincial post, remote, snowy, surrounded by goats. He writes back 6 months later with a poem about isolation. You reply with one about patience. He gets the message. And yet, no amount of strategy can stop the shifting ground beneath your feet. The court changes. Some of your old allies retire, others die. New ministers rise, less afraid of you, more curious. Some whisper that it may be time for you to choose an heir, that perhaps your son, yes, the one you deposed, or maybe the other one, or perhaps the scholarly one with the mole, should take the throne. You nod politely, then change the subject to irrigation. You know their strategy, pressure through politeness. But you are not ready to step down. Not yet. Still, you begin grooming the idea of succession. You allow certain sons to reappear at court. You observe them during rituals, during disputes, during meals. Who listens? Who interrupts? Who asks for salt before tasting? You keep a list. Meanwhile, you launch one of your most ambitious reforms, a civil service examination open to commoners. Before now, only aristocratic families could access government posts. But you want brilliance, not just lineage. You create a new exam focusing on practical governance, ethics, and calligraphy under pressure. The results are stunning. A farmer's son scores highest. A butcher's daughter passes the pre-test but is barred from final entry by tradition. You invite her to the palace as an advisor anyway. She brings her own inkstone. You've also adjusted punishments. Where earlier dynasties used floggings and exile, you introduced fine-based systems and public service. Let discipline be a lesson, not an ending, you write. Still, for those who betray trust, especially trust placed by you, justice remains sharp. Then, comes the meteor. It streaks across the northern sky, bright, loud, unforgettable. The people murmur, a sign, they say, an omen. Some claim it means death, others change. You act fast. The next day, you issue a beautiful scroll titled The Heavenly Alignment. In it, you explain the meteor as a cosmic acknowledgement of your rule's virtue, a celestial nod. You quote Buddhist texts, Confucian verses, even an old Taoist weather manual, which you definitely just read last week. The people are soothed. More importantly, the ministers are silenced. You've mastered not just leadership, but storytelling. Still, you don't ignore the signs. You begin strengthening the Zhao name further. You build temples not to yourself, but to concepts, justice, harmony, vigilance. You send statues of these virtues to the provinces, each with a plaque bearing one of your edicts. Some mock it, others kneel. You also create a new calendar cycle, shorter, more precise, aligned with seasonal festivals and agricultural rhythms. It's beautiful, elegant, predictable, like you. And then, one early spring morning, you do something unexpected. You walk outside. No guards, no ceremony, just you, a scarf, and the plum blossoms. The city stops. Vendors freeze mid-sale. Children stare. An old woman gasps and drops her fan. You nod at her. She bows so low you think she might never rise. You return to the palace with flushed cheeks and the scent of flowers in your sleeves. The story of your stroll spreads faster than any decree. They say, "She walks among us." Maybe that's the greatest power of all, not to command from above, but to appear mortal, touchable, present. It's risky. It's brilliant. It's you. And later that night, alone with your mirror, you trace one of your invented characters. Clarity. The reflection nods back. By now, the Zhou dynasty is no longer a whispered experiment. It is a functioning empire with you at the center, unmistakably, immovably sovereign. The court has adapted. The people have adjusted. And your name, once controversial even inside your own family, is now chanted in temples and etched in steel stone beside harvest prayers and tax remissions. Still, being emperor never means you're done. Not with the schemes, not with the stories, not with the shadows. You begin focusing on longevity, not just yours, though that would be convenient, but your dynasty's. And longevity, you decide, must be built on information, faith, and architecture. You commission surveys of every province, farms, rivers, forests, even cemeteries. An empire must know its bones, you declare in one of your footnotes. The Bureau of Cartography is expanded. They start producing maps so precise the city granaries could be located by scent. Next, you shift your attention to Buddhism. It has always served you well, a faith of karmic justice and gender-blurred divinity. But now you make it personal. You issue an edict declaring yourself the reincarnation of Maitreya, the future Buddha. Not metaphorically, literally. It causes a small riot among Confucian purists, a mild panic among rival monks, and complete adoration among the common people, who have long considered your face more serene than most deities. Temples begin adapting your image into murals. You are shown dispensing scrolls instead of lotus blossoms. A child's lullaby is composed about your ink-born wisdom. You don't endorse it, but you don't stop it either. And of course you begin construction. Massive, ambitious, pointedly unnecessary construction. You commission a cowering Buddha carved directly into a mountain cliff, taller than a 10-story building. His expression is neutral, but there's a suggestion of a knowing smile, your signature. Beneath him is a tablet, inscribed with a prayer you wrote, but signed only with the character for light. The people call him the Wu Buddha. You let them. You also upgrade the capital. You pave roads with smoother stone, extend aqueducts, beautify gardens with rare plants from Tibet and southern jungles. You even open public bathhouses, emphasizing cleanliness of body and conscience. Court jesters whisper, "The Empress wants to scrub our sins away." You promote one for creativity. Still, as the empire expands, so do the risks. Northern tribes begin testing your borders. Nothing massive, just nudges. Raiders here, a blocked caravan there. You respond swiftly, not just with armies, but alliances. You invite their emissaries to Luoyang. You host grand banquets, feed them candied lotus, and recite poetry about mountains and horses. You gift them silk robes embroidered with the character for mutual respect. Then, at just the right moment, you casually mention that your generals have been training with new crossbow formations. The emissaries eat faster. Even foreign observers start to take serious note. Korean scholars send copies of your reforms home, describing them as unusually balanced. A Persian merchant writes, "The emperor is like an invisible clock, always ahead, never rushed." An Indian monk compares your governance to the rhythm of temple bells. Some of these quotes you frame. But inside the court, storms begin to rumble. Your sons, now men, see the writing on the walls. One writes a poem titled, "The Moonlight is Always the Same," clearly a veiled comment on succession. Another begins courting support from older ministers, nostalgic for Tong days. You watch. You sip tea. You adjust your inkstone. And then you do something no one expects. You recall your previously deposed son, Li Jie, to court. The one you demoted, exiled, scolded in poetry. You invite him back, publicly, with honors. Whispers erupt. Why? Has she gone soft? Is she dying? No. You're setting the chessboard. You bring him back to show you still control the pieces. You seat him at court, give him ceremonial duties, assign him a staff, your staff. He bows. He says nothing, but you see it in his posture. He remembers exactly who holds the ink brush. Meanwhile, you continue rewriting rituals. You change the order of temple offerings. You replace old songs with newer, quieter ones. You allow women to participate in ancestor rites. Confucians grumble. Buddhists rejoice. The people are divided, but deeply curious. And that's what you want, their attention. Because with attention comes loyalty, and with loyalty comes legacy. Still, the court watches your every move. They track your health, your appetite, even your steps. You fake a limp one morning just to observe their panic. That night, you walk unassisted to the archives and laugh quietly by candlelight. But you feel it too. Not weakness, not yet, but the closeness of time. The way your hair is slower to dry. The way your knees ache on cold stone. You brush it off. You write more. You read more. You rule harder. And still you're gentle where you can be. You pardon minor offenders. You lower salt taxes in drought areas. You send physicians to villages struck with winter fevers. You issue one particularly odd edict outlying unpleasant dream scrolls, nightmare-inducing art meant to scare children into obedience. You write, "Let the state correct behavior, not shadows." Scholars study it for decades. Now, as the harvest nears, you walk the palace garden in twilight. The trees are older, so are you. But everything still listens when you breathe. And you realize this is what you've built, an empire that bends toward your voice, but blooms under your silence. The scrolls come in thicker now. Reports, petitions, praise poems, warnings disguised as philosophy. You read them all, even when your eyes blur under candlelight. No one edits them for you, not anymore. You trust your scribes, but not that much. By now, your bureaucracy hums like a lute string, clean, balanced, tuned. You've even created an office for reviewing the reviewers, a team whose sole job is to check whether other officials are being too generous in their reports. The irony doesn't escape you. One time, you caught a clerk describing river maintenance in a region where the river had dried up 10 years ago. He now manages mosquito nets in a humid valley. Still, what you find most interesting now isn't what your empire says, it's how it breathes. You notice when harvest festivals grow smaller in one district, when complaints vanish entirely from a region that previously sent 3 a week. You ask questions others are too proud to ask. Why are there fewer wedding ceremonies in Jiangxi this year? Has anyone tested the quality of ink in Jiangdong lately? Your aides scribble frantically behind you. They say the emperor misses nothing. They're not wrong. And you don't just monitor, you teach. You invite young scholars, men and women, to read with you at dawn. They recite the Analects, the Lotus Sutra, your own edicts. You correct pronunciation gently. You ask them to rewrite passages as riddles, as songs, as love letters to the idea of justice. Sometimes you laugh. Once you clap your hands in delight when a girl from a farming village rhymes virtue with pigeon in a legal metaphor. You give her a promotion. She cries. You pretend not to notice. But even as you cultivate intellect, your attention never drifts from the machinery of control. You know a loyal governor can lose his footing if his cousin in court grows too bold. You know that alliances rot faster than summer pears, so you keep moving your pieces. You rotate officials every 2 years, enough time to learn the terrain, not enough to plant a rebellion. You allow petitions against your own policies, but only on specific parchment, distributed by your office. If someone complains on improper scrolls, well, they're clearly not familiar with the correct way to dissent. The punishment is mild, mostly paperwork, and a stern look. And you never stop writing. Your edicts now span every topic. You regulate bridge width, mandate better pay for stable boys. You issue an entire set of scrolls on shoe construction, insisting that the foot's peace ensures the journey's success. The cobblers love you. Still, not all is smooth. Court rivalries persist, quieter but sharper. One group of ministers begins aligning around your oldest grandson. They speak of renewal, succession, the wisdom of early transition. You respond by casually inviting the grandson to debate tax policy with you in front of 50 officials. He stammers. You smile. The ministers shuffle their feet. You send him back to his estate with a collection of legal texts and a politely phrased request to read each one before speaking again. You also begin experimenting with public messaging. Once a month, your court artists paint story scrolls illustrating recent policies. One shows a magistrate saving a widow from false taxes. Another shows a minister being corrected by a humble farmer. In every scroll, you appear as a glowing figure, serene, poised, holding a brush that glows just faintly gold. Some call it propaganda. You call it bedtime reading. You're not above subtlety either. You introduce a new ceremonial incense called Clear Mind. It's burned during court sessions and official exams. You claim it improves focus. What it actually does is mask nerves and make everyone forget their own objections. One minister writes home, her court smells like wisdom and fear. Outside the capital, the countryside flourishes. You've sent medical caravans to remote villages, planted schools where there once were abandoned shrines, commissioned wells and granaries with the funds saved by canceling 2 unnecessary palace banquets. You've even regulated how far apart tea shops can be built in rural towns. Too close and tempers boil, you write in the margin. Too far and feet blister. But even in prosperity, you remain vigilant. Your personal bodyguard grows larger, though it blends in with the court's aesthetic. Eunuchs trained in martial arts, ladies-in-waiting who've memorized assassination methods. Your inner chambers are swept daily, not for dust, but for poison needles and listening devices disguised as jewelry. You sleep lightly, always have. One night you wake to find the moonlight perfect for writing, so you draft a short decree reducing taxes for lotus farmers. You call it a gift from the moon. People begin holding lotus festivals on full moons thereafter. And so your presence bleeds into culture, not by force, but by familiarity. Children grow up speaking your proverbs. Fishermen name boats after your virtues. Even dogs, you hear, are being named Woo. Still, your thoughts drift more often now to what will remain. What will be whispered 2 generations from now? What ink will outlast your voice? And in that quiet concern, you issue one of your most enduring decrees, the standardization of edict style. You define line length, character spacing, and the placement of seals, so that the future may read the past with ease, you write. Some say it's your most beautiful scroll. Others say it's boring. You say, good, because boring lasts. There's a saying in the palace now, beware the golden hairpin. It started as a joke, whispered between nervous clerks and wide-eyed scribes. But jokes in your court have a way of turning serious, because the last time someone found a golden hairpin lodged between pages of an imperial report, that minister vanished the next day. You never confirmed the meaning of the symbol. Was it a warning? A signature? A test? You didn't say. You just issued a new memo on the importance of accurate record keeping. and wore gold in your hair the next day. Message received. The truth is, you don't rely on fear, not entirely, but you understand its utility. You also understand that power is a performance, and sometimes the tension in the silence is more important than the volume of your decree. Still, the palace pulses with intrigue. Late one autumn evening, a maid reports a suspicious scroll in a flower vase. It contains a coded poem. It's not a good one. Something about jade petals and crumbling thrones, but it's signed with a curious mark, a stylized phoenix feather. You narrow your eyes. That's your symbol. Someone is mocking you, or challenging you, or both. You don't react, at least not in public. But that night you summon Wei Tuan-er, your quietest agent, the one who never writes anything down. You hand him a blank sheet of paper. You say, "Find the poet." No other instructions are needed. Within days, you have names. A few nobles, a discontented court musician, one scholar whose essays have been growing a little too clever. You don't punish them directly. That would be clumsy. Instead, you begin to rearrange. The musician is sent to oversee temple restorations, far, far away. The scholar is invited to compose a historical volume on proper manners, under close supervision. The nobles are given new ceremonial duties, very dull, very public, very exhausting. It's not revenge, it's realignment, but not all plots in poetry. Whispers reach your ears about more serious dissent. There are rumors, rebellion rumors, secret meetings among officials loyal to the old Tang line. Some say they've reached out to one of your exiled sons. Others claim they've hidden weapons in a tea house. You dispatch spies. You dispatch tea inspectors. You dispatch a poet, for good measure. One morning, just before a festival, you have 3 men arrested. They aren't interrogated. They're invited to tea, and when they arrive, you greet them personally. Calm, bare-handed. You recite a poem about the loyalty of river stones. By the end of the meeting, one is weeping, one is trembling, and the third volunteers to write your biography. You decline, for now. But the message is clear. Rebellion isn't just futile, it's embarrassing. Still, not all threats come from court. Assassination attempts, while rare, do happen. One involves a poisoned brush handle, another a jade figurine laced with slow-acting toxins. Both are caught in time. Your food tasters become legends in their own right. One receives a promotion and a scroll titled, "To Smell Danger in Broth." And through it all, your rule remains remarkably steady. You continue refining your reforms, introducing a new system for monitoring flood-prone provinces, implementing health guidelines in overcrowded cities, and, most controversially, regulating perfume strength in indoor spaces. You write, "Too much sandalwood is a form of oppression." The nobles roll their eyes. The servants sigh in relief. And in the middle of all this, you still find time for the arts. You commission a collection of mirror poems, verses that read the same forward and backward. One tells the story of a phoenix who forgets its name. Another ends with the line, "What power builds, silence keeps." You don't sign them, but your voice is obvious. You also revive an ancient tradition, the midnight court. Once a season, you hold audience during the darkest hour of the night. Lit only by lanterns, with no titles spoken, ministers are expected to speak plainly, without rank, without ceremony. It's a test of honesty, of nerve. Some love it, some dread it. One official faints before his turn. And still, through all these rituals, something heavier lingers. Your sons grow quieter. They smile, yes, they bow, they pretend. But you see the restlessness behind their eyes. They are grown men, and you remain the center of gravity. One begins drinking. Another becomes increasingly obsessed with calligraphy, spending hours alone practicing signatures that will never see an edict. You don't blame them, but you don't trust them either. And in a rare, candid moment, you write in your private journal, "They are my blood, not my heirs." You also begin drafting contingency plans, backup successors, hidden regents. You create sealed envelopes to be opened only under specific circumstances. You train a group of young women scribes in the full legal canon, quietly. But power, even prepared, is never still. One evening, a fire breaks out in the south wing of the palace. Small, contained, yet oddly timed just after a suspicious message was intercepted leaving the city. You order an investigation. It leads to a clerk, then to a cousin, then to one of your own grandsons. You summon him. He expects punishment, perhaps exile, perhaps worse. Instead, you pour tea, and you tell him a story of a phoenix who flew too close to its reflection. He leaves confused. He doesn't plot again. But the lesson isn't for him. It's for the court. You've become more than a ruler. You're a mirror, and those who see themselves too clearly in you are often the most afraid. The golden hairpin returns one morning, laid gently on your writing table. No one claims it. No one needs to. You wear it that day, just behind your ear, a quiet gleam, a warning. And the palace, for a while, falls back into order. You begin to notice it in the details, the way the stone steps take a moment longer to climb, the subtle change in how your physicians greet you, cheerful but with longer bows, the increased number of ginseng parcels sent from regional governors. No one says anything directly, of course. They wouldn't dare. But you feel it. Time is slowing you, however gently. Still, your days remain full. You rise early, conduct morning rites with precision, and host court sessions that stretch well past tea time. You hold audiences with scholars, artisans, generals, and even a group of blind musicians seeking state funding. You approve them all after they perform a piece so haunting that even the guards at the back wipe their eyes. You still write your own edicts. One, issued in early spring, covers regulations on poultry hygiene in city markets. "Clean hands, calm stomachs," you write, a line that somehow becomes a proverb within the month. Another reform mandates that scroll carriers undergo etiquette training. "A scroll deserves grace," you explain. But beneath the routine, something shifts. The court grows restless, not chaotic, just unsettled. Your ministers know change is coming, not because you're failing, far from it, but because nature insists that no sun hangs in the sky forever. You can see the calculations in their eyes. Some try to guess your favorite among your sons. Others rehearse being supportive of whichever successor you choose. A few have even taken to quoting your early essays aloud at court, as if the best student might be rewarded with the best future. You play along, for now. Because this moment, this twilight of your reign, is delicate. It's not about clinging. It's about shaping what comes next. So you begin issuing edicts on legacy. One mandates that imperial libraries remain open to common scholars twice per year. Another requires temples to teach basic reading and arithmetic. You call it knowledge as grain, sustenance for the mind. You also send inspectors not just to audit taxes, but to collect stories, real ones, from farmers, weavers, street performers. What has changed in your life? You ask through them. What do you wish would never change again? Some of their responses are turned into songs, others into murals. A few are read aloud at court, much to the confusion of certain nobles who are not accustomed to hearing the phrase, "I just want quieter goats." And still the whispers grow. One morning, while reading a report on canal repairs, you notice a subtle phrasing. "As we await further word from Her Majesty or her successor." You tap your brush once, then twice, then you smile. You summon the writer, a young bureaucrat with nervous hands and an ink stain on his collar. You ask him if he thinks a successor should be announced. He stammers. You wait. Finally, he says, "Not yet. Your words still build bridges." You promote him, quietly. But even you can't avoid the weight of mortality forever. You begin waking in the middle of the night, your fingers curled from cold. The physician blames damp air. Another recommends prayers and broth. A third simply looks at the floor and says nothing. So you begin a new practice, walking the gardens just before dawn. You move slowly, alone, wrapped in thick layers of silk. The garden is still, the air clean, and the flowers, your flowers, bloom whether you watch them or not. It comforts you. You also begin speaking more often to your attendants, not orders, but memories. You tell one girl how you used to sneak sweets into scroll cabinets as a child. Another hears how you once disguised yourself as a servant to listen to a provincial judge. They laugh. You do too. But beneath it all, you are preparing. You summon artisans and commission a final stele, not of you, but of the empire. A scene of daily life, farmers, scholars, riverboats, a child flying a kite. You draft the inscription yourself. To govern is to serve. To serve is to see. It's short, uncharacteristic, but perfect. And quietly you begin shaping the final transition. You restore Li Jie, your son, your once deposed heir, to the position of crown prince. It's not a concession, it's a calculation. He has matured. He bows deeper now, writes better, smiles less. You meet him privately beneath the lantern trees. He kneels. You speak only once. What will you protect? He answers, the silence between your words. Good enough. You issue an edict naming him successor, but leave it unannounced. For now. Then one morning, you feel it. You try to rise. Your knees ache too sharply. Your breath is shallow. You wave off attendants, tell them to bring ink. They panic, but obey. You write one last line. The scroll ends, but the message does not. And then you lie back on your silken pillows, breathe in the scent of sandalwood, and close your eyes. The news travels softly at first, like the ripple of wind over silk. The emperor is ill. Then, the emperor rests. Then, finally, and only in a whisper, the emperor is gone. You are not buried immediately. First comes ritual, a series of steps you yourself once revised for clarity, now performed in exacting silence. Officials gather. Scribes weep, some honestly, some politely. And still, all of them wait for confirmation, for direction, for your final move, even now. Because your presence does not leave with your breath. It lingers. In every scroll room and stone corridor, in every policy on food distribution, in the bronze mirrors etched with your characters, in the inked laws copied across provinces where people say your name with something close to awe. Li Jie, now Emperor Zhongzong, once again steps forward. He does not roar into power. He enters it like a man standing under your shadow, quietly aware that the sunlight has only shifted, not vanished. He confirms your burial at Qiangling Mausoleum, high on a slope in a spiral tomb lined with stone statues. Inside, your sarcophagus will rest beside Gaozong's, as tradition suggests. But everyone knows, everyone, whose name history will linger on. The court prepares your posthumous title. And here, once again, you surprise them. A sealed decree arrives, written in your hand, predating your passing by months. It reads, "Let there be no posthumous name of flattery. Let my deeds speak. Let ink suffice." Some ministers object. Others nod solemnly. The final title, as issued, is brief, almost rude by prior standards. But it fits. Now, you might expect chaos to follow. After all, you ruled for decades with unmatched precision. But your systems hold, your reforms remain, your bureaucracies, carefully stacked like ceramic bowls, do not collapse. Because you never built them on fear. You built them on habits. And habits outlast emperors. For a time, Zhongzong rules wisely, or tries. He keeps many of your reforms intact, knowing that changing too much would be like repainting the stars. But he also begins reintroducing Tong symbols. He writes poems about returning rivers and ancestral winds. A soft rebranding, subtle. You would have smirked. But what he cannot undo is your reach. Even decades later, When a minister questions the validity of a certain provincial system, the reply comes, "That was established under Wu." Full stop. No debate. Your influence becomes a benchmark. Schools still teach from the scrolls you standardized. Women, while not exactly flooding the courts, are no longer invisible. And Buddhist institutions remember your name in daily recitations. You even make it into folklore. A traveling theater troupe tells your story as a rags-to-riches tale involving a magic scroll, a talking bird, and a dragon who teaches you diplomacy. Wildly inaccurate, but it brings the crowd to tears every time. You might have made them rewrite the ending, but you'd be pleased with the applause. And even beyond China's borders, your legacy crosses oceans. Historians in Korea cite your rule as a golden age of literary exchange. Buddhist monks in Japan trace their ordination lines back to temples you once funded. Persian traders refer to you simply as the ink Empress. Of course, time rounds the edges. Later dynasties, some resentful, some reverent, reshape your story. Some call you cruel, others call you wise, a few call you both. They debate your motives, your reforms, your family drama, whether the golden hairpin meant anything at all. But none can erase you, because you are not just remembered, you are recorded. In steel, in paper, in custom. And one winter, centuries after your final breath, a scholar sits alone in a quiet library. She finds a tattered volume of imperial edicts. The ink is faded, the characters old-fashioned, but the name on the first page? Wu Satya. She reads your words by candlelight. She copies one line into her own journal. She doesn't know it, but in that moment, your reign begins again, if only for a heartbeat. And you still are writing. There is something strange about legacy, the way it walks ahead of you, even while you're still alive, and then lingers behind long after you're gone. For Empress Wu, or Emperor Wu, as you insisted, it is not just a memory. It's a blueprint, a mood, a voice in the corridors of time that never quite goes silent. Years pass, decades roll on. New emperors arise, fall, scheme, and sweat beneath crowns lighter than the one you wore. Yet when governance falters, someone will always mutter, "In Wu's time, this would not have been tolerated." It's not nostalgia, it's calibration. You become a measuring stick of discipline, of ambition, of vision wrapped in calligraphy and sealed with phoenix red wax. Of course, there are attempts to sand down your memory. A few dynasties later, court historians take a chisel to your reputation. They call you manipulative, dangerous, unnatural, a woman who dared to write her name where none had been written before. One record even suggests you used witchcraft to curse rivals. Another, more poetic, accuses you of writing spells disguised as law. You would have laughed, and then had them reassigned to border guard duty. But for every story that tries to reduce you, another rises in quiet defiance. An elderly woman in Sichuan lights incense to your name, not as a goddess, but as a guide. A traveling storyteller in Guangzhou spins your tale for children with wide eyes and sticky rice in their hands. A young girl, taught by her grandfather, recites one of your poems before a school exam for good luck. You are not just history now. You are infrastructure. Your legal codes form the bones of future dynasties. Your reforms, merit-based exams, land audits, and the bureaucratic checks and balances become default settings. Your written language innovations, while not fully adopted, spark debates that echo into modern script reform. Even in architecture, your preferences linger. Courtyards shaped for contemplation, not just command. Temples with open space for both monks and the common people. Gates carved with characters of your invention, weathered now but still legible. But your most peculiar legacy, skincare. Yes, centuries later, palace records of your beauty rituals become objects of obsession. A mix of ground pearl powder, lotus root, and rainwater stored in jade bowls is rediscovered in a dusty scroll and promptly copied, sold, and marketed with your name. Wu's glow becomes a trending phrase. You become the first emperor with a beauty line. Historians groan, marketers cheer. And then there are the questions. They never stop. Was she cruel or clever? Did she love any of her sons? Did she write the mirror poems herself or dictate them? Was her Buddhist devotion sincere or just a veil of politics? Did she orchestrate the death of her own child? The truth is, all these questions contain their answers, and none of them do. Because you were never just one story. You were the mother who led armies, the widow who restructured taxation, the poet who outwrote her censors, the strategist who could smile in silk while drafting someone's demotion with perfect meter. You were, as one scholar later writes, the phoenix who taught the dragon to blink. And while many rulers fade into the parchment of chronicles, you remain vivid, not because you were flawless, but because you were deliberate. Even your silences were architectural. In the end, the same scholar who doubted you in his youth later concludes in a quiet, half-erased note, "She governed more justly than most men, and wrote more beautifully than all." Your tomb still stands, your mountain statue still gazes, and somewhere in the hush of an archive, a brush moves, slowly, reverently. Your name is written again, and the scroll does not end. The wind over the capital feels different now. It's slower, softer, the kind of breeze that rustles scrolls instead of flags, lifts petals instead of swords. The Zhou dynasty has folded back into Tang, as you planned, quietly and without war drums. And yet, your fingerprints remain on everything, from the shape of imperial seals to the rhythm of harvest festivals. You are gone, yes, but the empire you molded continues to walk in the footsteps you carved. Your son, Emperor Zhongzong, now rules in full. He inherits not just the throne, but the system you built, efficient, precise, expectant. He struggles at first, like a singer asked to follow the act of a lifetime. His decisions are scrutinized, his decrees compared to the way you might have done it. You left him a stable empire, but no cushion of low expectations. Still, to his credit, he keeps many of your policies. He preserves the civil service exams, the balanced tax reforms, the public schooling decrees. He even maintains your calendar adjustments, though he tweaks festival timing to suit his court astrologers. Some see this as gratitude, others as caution. Either way, your shadow is long, and no one steps out from it easily. Back in Luyong, your mausoleum becomes a quiet place of pilgrimage, not grand, not ostentatious, just present. A winding path leads through statues and still-standing trees up the hillside to the chamber where you now rest beside your husband, your predecessor, your beginning. Visitors whisper when they arrive. Some kneel. A few leave plum blossoms. One child, too young to know your name, but old enough to understand reverence, places a hand on the stone and says, "She must have been very smart." That's enough. Even centuries later, your image resurfaces. A Tang-era scholar includes you in his list of 10 most curious rulers. A Song dynasty poet dedicates a verse to the lady who named herself emperor. A Ming emperor, desperate to reform his court, rereads your administrative decrees and copies several into his own rule book. And then there are the women. A noblewoman in the north requests to be educated like her brothers, citing you. A nun in the south carves your name into a prayer wheel. A playwright in the capital writes a tragedy about your rise, where you are both villain and heroine, fierce and kind. It is banned, then performed secretly, then copied 100 times over. Your legacy resists simplification. And maybe that's the best you could have hoped for. Because the truth is, you were never just an emperor. You were an origin point, a complication, a challenge to what was believed immovable. And even now, in a world that has shifted, where dynasties have fallen, borders have changed, and your language has evolved, your story still stirs. One late spring evening, as lanterns are lit across the modern city where Luyong once stood, a teacher reads aloud your Edict on Clarity. Her students, half asleep from too much rice and too little breeze, suddenly sit up. She says, "This was written over 1,000 years ago, by a woman." They blink, and someone whispers, "She sounds familiar." Because you do. You're the sound of ink gliding confidently across silk, the click of a seal pressed with intention, the voice behind the screen, no longer hidden, the ruler who didn't wait to be allowed. You didn't conquer with armies, you conquered with edits. One scroll at a time. And somewhere, even now, another hand picks up a brush, ready to begin their own. Because you proved that legacy doesn't wait to be invited. It writes itself, and it signs in bold. And now the story rests. The scrolls are rolled up, the lanterns dim. The palace gardens, once echoing with footsteps and petitions, are quiet again. Just the whisper of wind through plum blossoms, the low murmur of incense drifting across old stone. You too can let go now. You've walked a long way tonight, through ceremony and silence, ambition and grace. You've stood behind the screen, then stepped boldly into the light. You've watched empires shift, policies unfold, and golden hairpins speak louder than swords. But here at the edge of the dream, it's safe to pause. Feel the weight ease from your shoulders. The robes grow lighter. The crown fades not with loss, but with rest. Outside, the night deepens. The city sleeps. Even the stars seem quieter. And as you drift now, slowly, gently, let the rhythm of calligraphy become the rhythm of your breath. Let each stroke, each sound, each step into memory settle softly across your thoughts. You've earned this stillness. Tomorrow the world will continue. Laws will be written, dreams will be shaped, names will be remembered. But for now, there is only this moment. A quiet garden, a fading scroll, and sleep.